Sarah Martinez wiped her hands on her apron as the dinner rush began at the military base cafeteria. Steam rose from the industrial kitchen where she had worked for 3 years, serving meals to soldiers who barely noticed her. At 32, she moved quietly between the stainless steel counters, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her uniform always spotless despite the chaos around her. Most of the personnel who came through her serving line saw nothing more than another kitchen worker. They grabbed their trays, mumbled thanks, and moved on. Sarah had become invisible in plain sight, just another face behind the steam tables. But invisibility had its advantages. Every morning at 500 hours, Sarah arrived before the other kitchen staff. While coffee brewed and ovens heated, she studied. Hidden beneath her recipe folders were tactical manuals, weapons specifications, and combat strategy guides. She memorized every detail about firearms, explosives, and military operations. The knowledge burned inside her like a secret fire. Her colleagues thought she was just extremely dedicated to her job. Maria, the head cook, often praised Sarah's attention to detail. "You read those supply catalogs like they're novels," Maria would joke, never knowing that Sarah was actually studying sniper rifle specifications hidden between the pages. The truth was that Sarah Martinez had not always been a kitchen worker. 7 years ago, she had been Staff Sergeant Martinez, one of the top marksmen in her unit. She could put 3 rounds through a quarter at 600 yards. Her commanding officers called her Deadeye because she never missed. But a roadside bomb in Afghanistan changed everything. The explosion took her left leg below the knee and filled her back with shrapnel. The doctor said she was lucky to be alive. The military said she was unfit for active duty. They offered her a medical discharge with full benefits and suggested she find a quiet job where she could recover. The base kitchen seemed like a safe place for a wounded warrior to fade away. But Sarah never stopped being a soldier. Every night after her shift, she went to the abandoned warehouse district near the base. In an old building that nobody visited, she had set up a makeshift training facility. She practiced with weapons she had acquired through private channels, maintaining skills that the military no longer wanted. Her prosthetic leg made movement different, but not impossible. She learned to compensate, to use her injury as an advantage rather than a weakness. She could brace herself in ways that others could not, creating stability that enhanced her already remarkable accuracy. The warehouse walls were covered with perfect groupings from hundreds of training sessions. On this particular Tuesday evening, as Sarah cleaned the last of the serving equipment, she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. 2 officers were discussing a hostage situation that had developed at the nearby civilian airport. Terrorists had taken control of a terminal, demanding the release of prisoners from a military detention facility. "We've got SEAL Team 6 mobilizing," Colonel Harrison said to his companion. "But the situation is complicated. The terrorists have positioned themselves in a way that makes conventional assault nearly impossible." Sarah continued wiping down the counter, her movements never changing, but her mind raced. She knew the airport layout perfectly. She had studied it during her recovery, along with every other strategic location within 50 miles of the base. It was part of her obsession with maintaining operational readiness. "The problem is the main terminal," the colonel continued. "They've got snipers on the upper level with clear sight lines to all entrances. Our intel suggests they have at least 12 hostages, including several children." Sarah's jaw tightened. Children. The one thing that could always push her past any limitation or fear. She thought of her own daughter, Emily, who lived with her ex-husband in California. Emily was only 8 years old, the same age as some of those hostages probably were. As the officers left the cafeteria, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She finished her cleanup duties with mechanical precision, then walked to her supervisor's office. Maria was still there, working on the next day's meal planning. "I need to take some personal time," Sarah said quietly. Maria looked up with concern. "Are you feeling all right? You've been working straight shifts for weeks." "I'm fine. Just need to handle something urgent." Maria nodded without asking questions. Sarah had never caused problems, never called in sick, never complained about anything. She had earned the right to some flexibility. Sarah drove home to her small apartment near the base. She lived alone in a place that looked ordinary from the outside, but was filled with tactical equipment, hidden in clever ways. Her closet contained more than civilian clothes. Her bookshelf held more than romance novels. She changed out of her kitchen uniform and into dark, practical clothing. From a locked case under her bed, she retrieved her rifle. It was a custom-built weapon that she had assembled piece by piece over the past 3 years. Every component was perfectly calibrated to her specifications, compensating for her physical changes while maximizing her natural abilities. The drive to the airport took 20 minutes. Sarah parked her old Honda Civic in a residential area half a mile away and made her way on foot through the darkness. Her prosthetic leg moved silently across the uneven ground. Years of practice had taught her to navigate any terrain without detection. The airport perimeter was surrounded by police and military vehicles. Floodlights illuminated the main terminal building where the terrorists held their hostages. Sarah could see the SEAL team staging area in the distance, where America's elite warriors prepared for what would likely be a bloody assault. But Sarah saw something they might have missed. To the north of the main terminal stood an old air traffic control tower that had been abandoned when the airport built a newer facility. The tower was dark and appeared empty, but it offered a perfect vantage point for someone with the right skills. Sarah moved through the shadows like a ghost. Security was focused on the main terminal and the staging areas. Nobody was watching for a lone woman approaching from the residential side. She reached the base of the old tower and found what she expected, a service entrance that was secured with a simple padlock. The lock yielded to tools she always carried. Sarah climbed the narrow stairs inside the tower, her prosthetic legs silent on the metal steps. At the top, she found exactly what she needed, a clear view of the terminal's upper level where the terrorist snipers had positioned themselves. Through her rifle scope, Sarah could see the situation with perfect clarity. 3 enemy snipers covered the main approaches to the terminal. They were professionals, well-positioned and alert, but they were watching for threats from ground level and obvious sniper positions. They were not watching for someone in an abandoned tower that was supposed to be empty. Sarah settled into her shooting position, her body finding the perfect balance between her organic leg and prosthetic support. The familiar weight of the rifle felt like coming home. Her breathing slowed to the rhythm she had practiced thousands of times. The world narrowed to the view through her scope. The range was 450 yards. Not her longest shot, but challenging because of the angle and the need for absolute precision. She could not afford to miss, and she could not afford to hit anything except her intended targets. The hostages were too close to the terrorists for any margin of error. Sarah began her calculations, factoring wind speed, temperature, and the slight tremor in her hands that came from 3 years of suppressed adrenaline finally finding release. She had one chance to make a difference, one opportunity to be the soldier she had never stopped being inside. Through her earpiece, a piece of equipment she had acquired through careful networking with former military contacts, she could hear fragments of the SEAL team communications. They were planning their assault for dawn, hoping to use the early light to their advantage. But Sarah could see what they could not from their position. The terrorists were already moving to execute hostages as a demonstration of their resolve. Time was running out. Sarah made her choice and began to apply pressure to the trigger, her world focusing down to a single point of light in her scope. Everything she had lost, everything she had sacrificed, everything she had endured for 3 years came down to this moment. The kitchen worker was about to remind everyone that some weapons never truly retire, they just wait for the right moment to be needed again. Sarah Martinez had found her moment, and she was ready to take the shot that would change everything. The first shot broke the silence at exactly 11:47 p.m. Sarah's bullet traveled across the darkness and found its target with the precision of a surgeon's blade. The terrorist sniper on the terminal's eastern edge dropped instantly, his weapon clattering to the concrete floor. Through her scope, Sarah watched the confusion ripple through the remaining enemies. She had perhaps 30 seconds before they located her position. Sarah shifted her aim to the second sniper, a bearded man who was frantically scanning the area for threats. Her breathing remained controlled, her heartbeat steady despite the chaos about to unfold. The second shot came 18 seconds after the first. Another terrorist eliminated. The third sniper had found cover behind a concrete barrier, but Sarah could see a portion of his shoulder and arm. It was not a killing shot, but it would disable him effectively. She took her time with the third shot, knowing that wounded enemies often created more chaos than dead ones. The bullet shattered the man's shoulder, spinning him away from his weapon with a scream that carried across the night air. Suddenly, the SEAL team radios erupted with activity. "Unknown shooter! Unknown shooter! 3 tangos down on the upper level! Who has eyes on the shooter?" Sarah smiled grimly as she watched the elite soldiers scramble to identify what had just happened. They were professionals, and they adapted quickly to unexpected developments. Within minutes, she could see SEAL team members moving to exploit the opening she had created. But her work was far from over. Through her scope, Sarah spotted movement in the terminal's main concourse. The remaining terrorists were repositioning, using the hostages as human shields as they moved toward what appeared to be a prepared escape route. She counted at least 6 more armed men, plus what looked like a coordinator shouting orders. Sarah's position in the abandoned tower gave her an advantage that even the SEALs could not match from ground level. She could see the entire tactical situation unfolding like a chessboard. The terrorists were making a crucial mistake. They were moving in patterns that exposed them to someone with the right angle and the skill to exploit it. Her radio crackled with SEAL team communications. "Command, we have visual on hostages. Looks like they're being moved to the south exit. We need to intercept before they reach the vehicles." Sarah could see the vehicles they were talking about. 3 black SUVs positioned near the terminal's service road. But she could also see something the ground teams could not. 2 additional terrorists with rocket-propelled grenade launchers were positioned on the terminal's roof, waiting to provide cover for the escape. She switched her radio to the SEAL team frequency. Her voice was calm and professional as she broke protocol to make contact with American forces for the first time in 3 years. "SEAL Command, this is Overwatch. You have 2 RPG teams on the terminal roof, northwest corner. Recommend immediate action." The radio fell silent for a moment. Then a gravelly voice responded. "Overwatch, identify yourself. What is your position?" "SEAL Command, that information is not relevant. You have friendlies providing sniper support. Recommend you move on the south exit while I handle the roof." Sarah did not wait for permission. She had already identified her next targets and was adjusting her position for the difficult shots. The terrorists on the roof were partially concealed and at maximum range for her equipment. These shots would test every skill she possessed. The first RPG team was positioning their weapon when Sarah's bullet found the gunner. The man toppled backward, his weapon discharging harmlessly into the night sky. The explosion lit up the terminal roof and created enough confusion for Sarah to target the second team. Her final shot of the engagement took the second RPG gunner through the chest at nearly 600 yards, the longest shot of her military career, made with a prosthetic leg and equipment she had assembled in secret. As the second explosion echoed across the airport, Sarah saw the SEAL teams moving with deadly efficiency through the openings she had created. The ground assault lasted less than 15 minutes. Sarah watched through her scope as America's finest warriors did what they did best, close with and destroy the enemy while protecting innocent lives. Every hostage was recovered alive. Every remaining terrorist was either captured or neutralized. As dawn began to break over the airport, Sarah prepared to disappear back into obscurity. She had done what needed to be done, and now it was time to return to her invisible life in the kitchen. But as she began to disassemble her weapon, she heard footsteps on the tower stairs below. "Ma'am, we're coming up. Please do not move." Sarah recognized the voice of professional soldiers who were being careful but respectful. She placed her hands away from her weapon and waited. 3 SEAL team members appeared at the top of the stairs, their weapons ready but not directly threatening. The team leader was a tall man with steel-gray eyes and the bearing of someone who had seen every kind of combat imaginable. His name tape read Morrison. He looked at Sarah, taking in her civilian clothes, her makeshift equipment, and her prosthetic leg with the assessment of a professional warrior. "Ma'am, I'm Commander Morrison, SEAL Team 6. We need to talk." Sarah stood slowly, her hands still visible. "I understand, Commander. I was just leaving." "No, ma'am, you're not going anywhere. Not until we figure out who you are and how a civilian just provided some of the finest sniper support I've seen in 20 years of special operations." Morrison's radio crackled. "Commander, we've identified the unknown shooter. Sarah Martinez, former staff sergeant, discharged 3 years ago after injuries in Afghanistan. She works in the base kitchen." The SEAL commander's expression changed from suspicion to something approaching awe. "You're the kitchen lady? The one who serves chow at the base?" "Yes, sir. I serve food during the day." "Ma'am, what you did tonight, those shots you made, that was impossible shooting under impossible conditions. How does a kitchen worker make shots that would challenge our best snipers?" Sarah looked out at the terminal where emergency vehicles were now arriving to treat the wounded and evacuate the rescued hostages. "Because I never stopped being a soldier, Commander. I just learned to hide it better." Morrison studied her for a long moment. "Ma'am, we're going to need a full debrief, but first, I want to say something unofficially. What you did tonight saved lives. Those RPG teams would have turned our assault into a bloodbath. You saw what we couldn't see and acted when action was needed. I did my job, Commander, same as you did yours." "No, ma'am. You did our job better than we could have done it. From a position we never would have thought to use, with equipment you put together yourself after the military threw you away like broken equipment." Sarah's composure finally cracked slightly. "They didn't throw me away, Commander. They just decided I wasn't useful anymore." "Well, ma'am, they were wrong. And after tonight, a lot of people are going to know they were wrong." As federal agents and military investigators began to arrive at the scene, Sarah found herself at the center of a storm she had not anticipated. Her secret life was about to become very public, and the quiet kitchen worker who had spent 3 years in the shadows was about to discover that some actions cannot be hidden. Commander Morrison stayed with her as the questions began, and Sarah realized that her carefully constructed invisible life was over. But as she watched the last of the hostages being reunited with their families, she felt something she had not experienced since her injury: the satisfaction of being exactly who she was meant to be. The kitchen worker had pulled the trigger and reminded everyone that the most dangerous people are often the ones nobody sees coming. But now they had seen her, and Sarah Martinez was about to learn what happened when a ghost soldier stepped back into the light. The debriefing room at the military base was filled with people Sarah had never seen before. Federal agents, Pentagon officials, and senior military commanders all wanted answers about how a kitchen worker had single-handedly changed the outcome of a terrorist hostage situation. Sarah sat at a metal table, still wearing the civilian clothes from the night before, facing questions that would determine her future. General Patricia Collins, a woman with silver hair and intelligent eyes, led the questioning. She had flown in from Washington specifically for this debrief. Ms. Martinez, let's start with how you knew about the hostage situation. I overheard Colonel Harrison discussing it in the cafeteria. The kitchen staff hear a lot of conversations that officers think are private. And your decision to intervene was made how exactly? Sarah met the general's gaze directly. There were children involved, ma'am. I have a daughter. I couldn't stand by and do nothing when I had the ability to help. The ability to help, the general repeated. Ms. Martinez, the shots you made last night were at distances and angles that would challenge our best military snipers. How does someone who serves food develop and maintain those skills? For the next 3 hours, Sarah detailed her secret life. The warehouse training facility, the weapons she had acquired, the tactical manuals she studied, while her colleagues thought she was reading recipes. She explained how her injury had forced her to develop new techniques that actually made her more accurate in certain positions. Why didn't you approach the military about returning to active duty? Asked Colonel Barnes, a man with the bearing of someone who had never seen combat, but made decisions about those who did. Because you had already decided I was broken goods, sir. My medical discharge papers made it clear that I was unfit for duty. I wasn't going to beg for the chance to serve again. Commander Morrison, who had been silent during most of the questioning, finally spoke up. General Collins, with respect, Staff Sergeant Martinez demonstrated last night that she's more capable than most active duty personnel. The question isn't why she didn't come back to us. The question is why we let her go in the first place. General Collins studied Sarah carefully. Ms. Martinez, what do you want to happen now? You've exposed yourself, revealed capabilities that frankly surprised everyone in this room. You can't go back to being invisible. Sarah had been thinking about that question all night. I want to serve, ma'am. I never stop wanting to serve. But I want to serve where my abilities can make the most difference. And where do you think that would be? Wherever people need someone who can see what others can't see, who can take the shots that others can't take, who can operate alone when teams can't get into position. The room fell silent. Sarah could see the wheels turning in the minds of the officials present. She had demonstrated abilities that were extremely rare and had done so under conditions that proved her operational value. But she was also a liability, a wounded veteran who had acquired weapons through questionable channels and operated outside military authority. Agent Rebecca Stone from the FBI leaned forward. Ms. Martinez, there are legal issues here. You possessed weapons without proper permits, you interfered with an ongoing federal operation, and you operated in a combat role without authorization. Yes, ma'am, I broke several laws to save American lives. I would do it again. General Collins smiled slightly at Sarah's blunt honesty. That's exactly the kind of attitude we need more of. She turned to her aide. Colonel, I want a complete review of Ms. Martinez's service record and medical files. I also want recommendations from the SEAL team commanders about potential assignments. Commander Morrison nodded. General, I'd like to go on record. What Staff Sergeant Martinez did last night was exceptional by any standard. She provided tactical support that was crucial to mission success. She demonstrated skills that we could use in multiple operational contexts. What kind of contexts, Commander? Special operations support, counterterrorism, situations that require a sniper who can operate independently in civilian environments, someone who doesn't look like a soldier but can perform like our best operators. Sarah realized they were talking about her like she was a weapon to be deployed, rather than a person with her own desires and goals. If I may, General, I'm not interested in being a secret asset who disappears people. I want to serve openly, where my actions can be acknowledged and where I can be held accountable. That's refreshing honesty, Ms. Martinez. But not all valuable service can be public service. Then maybe we need to change how we think about valuable service, ma'am. The general laughed. a sound that surprised everyone in the room. You know what? You're absolutely right. We do need to change how we think about a lot of things. Over the following weeks, Sarah's life transformed in ways she had never imagined. The story of the kitchen worker who saved hostages could not be kept quiet despite official attempts at classification. Media outlets picked up fragments of the story, turning Sarah into an unwitting symbol of overlooked potential and wasted talent. Her phone rang constantly with interview requests, book deals, and speaking opportunities. But Sarah was more interested in the official offers that began to arrive. The FBI wanted her for their hostage rescue team. The CIA discussed consulting opportunities. Private security firms offered enormous salaries for her skills. But the offer that interested Sarah most came from an unexpected source: the Army's new Adaptive Warrior program, designed to find ways to keep wounded veterans in meaningful service roles. General Collins had personally recommended Sarah for the pilot program. "The idea is simple," General Collins explained during their final meeting. "We create new types of positions for people like you, veterans whose injuries made them supposedly unfit for traditional roles, but who actually developed capabilities that exceed traditional standards." What would I do? "You'd be a training instructor, an operational consultant, and when needed, a specialist operator. You'd work with SEAL teams, Army Rangers, and other special operations units. You'd teach them things that nobody else can teach, and you'd support operations that require your unique skill set." Sarah thought about the offer for exactly 3 seconds. "When do I start?" "General." 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of a classroom full of elite soldiers, wearing her new uniform with the rank insignia she had earned back through demonstrated capability. The prosthetic leg that had once marked her as disabled now served as proof that limitations existed only in people's minds. "Today we're going to talk about unconventional shooting positions," she told the class. "Most of you have been trained to think about stability in traditional ways. I'm going to teach you how to use apparent weaknesses as sources of strength." The students, Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Marine Force recon operators, listened with the attention that professionals paid to someone who had proven herself under fire. They no longer saw a kitchen worker or a disabled veteran. They saw Staff Sergeant Martinez, sniper instructor and operational specialist. Commander Morrison was in the back of the classroom observing the training session. After class, he approached Sarah with a smile. "How does it feel to be back where you belong, Staff Sergeant?" "It feels like I never left, Commander. I just had to take the long way back." "Any regrets about those 3 years in the kitchen?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "No, sir. Those years taught me patience, taught me to observe, taught me that the most important battles are often fought by people nobody notices. I needed to learn those lessons before I could be the soldier I am now." "And your daughter? How does she feel about having a famous mom?" Sarah laughed. "Emily thinks it's cool that her mom is on the internet, but she's more excited that I can finally come to her school's career day without having to pretend I'm just a lunch lady." That evening, Sarah returned to her apartment near the base. It looked different now. The hidden weapons were now openly displayed in a proper gun safe. The tactical manuals were on regular bookshelves, and the prosthetic leg that had once been a symbol of limitation now stood next to commendations for exceptional service. She had kept one thing from her old life, though. In her kitchen, she still had the apron she wore during those 3 years of invisibility. Sometimes she put it on when she cooked dinner, remembering the woman who had refused to accept that her service was over, who had prepared for a moment that might never come, who had stayed ready when everyone else had written her off. The kitchen worker had pulled the trigger and changed everything, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been told they weren't good enough anymore. Sarah Martinez had proven that the most dangerous people in the world are often the ones standing right in front of you, waiting for their chance to show what they can really do. From her kitchen window, she could see the old warehouse where she had trained in secret for 3 years. Tomorrow, it would become an official training facility for the Adaptive Warrior Program, where other discarded veterans would learn to turn their supposed limitations into operational advantages. Sarah smiled as she watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and red. She had found her way back to service, back to purpose, back to being exactly who she was meant to be. And it had all started with refusing to accept that her story was over just because someone else said it was. The trigger had been pulled, the shot had found its target, and Sarah Martinez was exactly where she belonged, standing ready to serve, visible at last, and more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined possible.